democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Bureau of Land Management held a controversial auction Friday to sell oil and gas drilling rights to nearly 150,000 acres of wilderness in southern Utah. The sale had been strongly opposed by many environmental groups. Stephen Bloch of the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance said, quote, "This is the fire sale, the Bush administration's last great gift to the oil and gas industry." A coalition of environmental groups opposed to energy development on public lands filed a lawsuit last week to block the auction. They struck a deal with the Bureau of Land Management that allowed the auction to proceed on the condition that the leases on the most contested portions of the land will not be issued for another 30 days until a federal judge hears the case. Actor Robert Redford has been among those speaking out against the sale of these lands.
Anyone who's been there can testify to the fact that there's no place like these lands. These lands are not Cheney's and Bush's. The lands are ours. They're ours because they're part of our legacy. They're part of the human American legacy. No place on earth, for anyone, as Congressman Barrett has said, no place on earth can speak to the balance of beauty and nature like these areas. And the fact that they would, there's so much deception, so much sleight of hand here. I mean, how would you feel if you had an heirloom that was centuries old in your family, that someone came in while you were not looking, or they distracted you by creating something over here and they took it away from you? How would you feel? This is not their land. It's our land. These are public lands, and the BLM is supposed to be protecting those lands on our behalf. Now, once these lands are taken away, they're gone. And gone doesn't come back. So I feel pretty strongly that we have to do everything. It isn't a question of trying to talk to them. Forget that. That doesn't work. They've been trashing the environment ever since they came in, almost like they had a duty to do so. But when they trash our lands and not theirs and claim it's their prerogative, then something's pretty criminal. So I say stop it. Enough is enough. Not only will it not serve the purpose they keep stating, it's not going to provide any new energy. It's going to pollute what we've already got, and it's going to take away something that is ours to give to our children, their children, and their children, and their children. So I feel pretty strongly about this. I appreciate being given the chance to speak to it. As I said before, it's an emotional situation for me, and we should not allow this to happen. It's criminal.
Actor Robert Redford opposing the sale of Utah wilderness to oil and gas companies. While many environmental groups launch campaigns to oppose the sale of the land, one student in Salt Lake City attempted to block the sale by disrupting the auction itself. 27-year-old Tim DeChristopher posed as a potential bidder and bid hundreds of thousands of dollars on parcels of the land, driving up prices and winning some 22,000 acres for himself without any intention of paying for them. The Bureau of Land Management must now wait over a month before it can auction off these properties, but by then the Bureau will no longer be run by the Bush administration. Tim DeChristopher was arrested Friday and is scheduled to appear in court later today. He joins us in Salt Lake City. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Tim DeChristopher.
Good morning, Amy. It's great to be here.
Well,
I read your book last summer and really enjoyed it.
Well, thanks. Why don't you start off by telling us what happened on Friday? What did you start off planning to do that day? Where were you?
I started off actually at a final exam at the university and went straight from there down to the BLM office. And I saw some protesters walking back and forth outside. And I knew that I wanted to do more than that, and that this kind of injustice demanded a higher level of disruption. And so I just decided that I wanted to go inside and cause a bigger disruption. And from there I found it really easy to get inside and become a bidder, and went inside and was in the auction room. And once I was in there, I realized that any kind of speech or disruption or something like that wasn't going to be very effective. But I saw pretty quickly that I could have a pretty major impact on the way this worked. And just took me a little bit of time to build up the courage to do that, knowing what the consequences would be. And so I started bidding and started driving up the prices for some of the oil companies. And throughout that time, I knew that I could be doing more and could really set aside some acres to really be protected. And so then I started winning bids and disrupting it as clearly as I could.
Now, how does it work? You get a paddle?
Yeah, just had a bidder paddle and just kept raising it as much as I could.
And you ended up buying, what, over 22,000 acres of land?
Right.
And where was this land?
Honestly, I didn't know at the time, but now it turns out that a lot of that land was the land right around Arches National Park, in Labyrinth Canyon and Mineral Point and beautiful places like that. So it turned out pretty well.
And now what are your intentions? Or first, I should ask, what was the response of the people in the room? When did they understand who you were, or did they at the time?
Once I started buying up every parcel, they understood pretty clearly what was going on. And so at that point, they stopped the auction, and some federal agents came in and took me out. And from other people who were in the room afterwards, I guess there was a lot of chaos, and they didn't really know how to proceed at that point. But then I was away talking to the federal agents at that point.
When did they arrest you?
Well, they took me into custody there on Friday, and they had me for a few hours. But it was a pretty cordial conversation that I was having with them. I was very clear about what I was doing and why I was doing it. I told them all my motivations and why the environmental movement, as it's been, and myself included, hasn't been effective, and why I felt it was necessary to take more drastic actions. So they took my statement there and decided that I wasn't a threat, and so they released me. But charges haven't been pressed yet. That's going to happen later today.
I'm looking at the Salt Lake Tribune article on you. It says he didn't pour sugar into a bulldozer's gas tank. He didn't spike a tree or set a billboard on fire. But wielding only a bidder's paddle, a University of Utah student just as surely monkey-wrenched a federal oil and gas lease sale Friday, ensuring that thousands of acres near 2 southern Utah national parks won't be open to drilling anytime soon. Can you talk about how it is that this land was being auctioned off, and what were the other companies, organizations in the room that were buying it up?
Well, basically, the Bush administration was trying to rush through this auction as quickly as possible to get it done before Obama took office, because they knew that it wouldn't be acceptable under any other administration other than Bush and Cheney. And so they just circled vast swaths of southern Utah. Their initial announcement included pieces of property that had houses on them in Moab. And included property that they didn't even have rights to drill in, or they didn't have rights to sell off, and included a lot of areas around national parks. And so they rushed through the process and didn't have time to do adequate environmental impact statements, didn't have time to take an adequate amount of public comment or even input from other federal agencies. And there was a big battle with the National Park Service. Because they were upset over a lot of areas that were included in there. But luckily, they also didn't have time to make sure that all the bidders were bonded, which is how I got in so easily.
Is this land you have walked, traveled, enjoyed?
I've been around that area a lot, and a lot of southern Utah and the wilderness throughout this state I've enjoyed for a long time, and that's why I originally came here. I spent my first 2 years in Utah working for a wilderness therapy program, and spending most of my time out there in some of the beautiful lands of Utah.
I want to go on in the Salt Lake Tribune piece where it says, during the confusion that followed DeChristopher's removal, Skibama, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this person's name right, Kathleen Skibama, Director of Government Affairs for the Independent Petroleum Association of Mountain States, said she'd seen Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance attorney David Garbett communicating with DeChristopher during the auction. She questioned whether SUA, that's the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance, had been acting in concert with DeChristopher, the BLM dubbed nuisance bidder. That was you. Were you working with other groups in the room?
No, there was no kind of plan or anything. The extent of the communication that the SUA attorney had with me was he dropped his business card in my lap on his way out the door, as he did with a lot of the other bidders who won land, because they were intending to try to protect some of those afterwards, hoping that the oil companies would be willing to give them up later. But it was just me in there acting alone. It wasn't especially premeditated. I got in there and saw the opportunity to make the difference, and then realized that seeing that opportunity